They were the stars the world once worshipped. Names carved into the Walk of Fame. Faces lit by flashbulbs, smiles so flawlessly rehearsed no one dared to doubt them. But behind the curtains, in the quiet of locked dressing rooms, they weren't just losing themselves. They were quietly picking up what didn't belong. A gleaming silver spoon, a hotel ashtray, a bottle of perfume never paid for. They didn't steal out of greed. They stole because something inside them was hollow, because recognition had faded, because the spotlight wasn't enough to fill the cracks within. Whether at the peak of fame or fading into obscurity, they shared one strange trait, finding proof of their existence in things quietly taken. And in those silent, lifeless objects lay the key to stories that are heartbreaking, haunting, and deeply human. This isn't an accusation. It's a journey into the truths the stage lights tried so hard to hide. Zsa Zsa Gabor, a symbol of opulent beauty and dazzling elegance, once captivated the press with her radiant charisma. But behind the flashbulbs and designer gowns was a soul yearning for recognition. She didn't steal out of poverty, but to freeze moments when she still lived in the limelight. The items she accidentally took, from royal crest ashtrays to jewel-encrusted pens, weren't mere trinkets, but proof that she once existed, once sparkled, once headlined every column. In 1953, she was accused of leaving a Monte Carlo jewelry store with an unpaid sapphire bracelet. Zsa Zsa laughed it off, claiming forgetfulness. But everyone knew it wasn't her first time. Her infamous quips like, "Darling, I don't borrow, I sample," delighted tabloids. But for producers, they spelled danger. She wasn't arrested, but she was distanced. As her fame faded, she began auctioning those keepsakes, her only way to preserve her legacy. Do you think a silver spoon can preserve a memory? For Zsa Zsa, it was the last truth she could hold on to. Judy Garland, star of The Wizard of Oz, the sweetheart of America, also stole. But not out of rebellion, out of despair. From a young age, Judy was under complete studio control, from her sleeping schedule to her calorie intake. In that world, nothing truly belonged to her, except the tiny things she secretly kept: a glittery hairpin, a tube of lipstick, a silver teaspoon. Once a velvet pouch of pins was found under her makeup chair. MGM buried the story. She didn't want to rebel. She just wanted to feel she still had agency. Later, during her tours for U.S. troops, Judy brought back perfumes, cufflinks, even military pins, reminders that she could still choose. But those choices also triggered anxiety. When she gave fans those harmless items, an unused lipstick or hotel spoon, they were apologies she couldn't voice. She didn't survive in that world. She merely endured through what little she could reclaim. And when the final curtain fell in 1969, Judy left the stage with a soul that had never truly found its way. Jean Tierney, the haunting beauty of Lorre, was grace personified on screen. But few knew that behind her perfect poise was a woman unraveling. After giving birth to a daughter with disabilities caused by rubella, contracted from a fan during a USO event, Jean sank into quiet grief. That grief clung to her like a perfume, and it was in perfume, delicate bottled memories, that Jean found momentary escape. She began slipping fragrances into her purse at luxury shops, always soft-spoken, always forgetful. She didn't steal boldly, she stole in silence. The soft clink of glass in her handbag became a lullaby to a time before pain. The studios noticed, her name dropped from marquees, insurance premiums soared. Even her engagement to Prince Ali Khan dissolved after rumors of missing silver trinkets. Eventually, Jean checked herself into a clinic. The papers called it exhaustion, but inside, she was confronting the urge to possess pieces of a world she'd lost. Each bottle wasn't just scent, it was safety, it was stillness, it was a moment before the heartbreak. Errol Flynn, the dashing rogue of The Adventures of Robin Hood, wasn't just a pirate on screen. Off camera, he turned theft into a game. He once bet he could steal every compass from the harbor market during the Seahawk shoot. By wrap day, he had a sack of 15. He lifted cigar cutters, monogrammed towels, even a mounted swordfish off a bar wall. At first, everyone laughed. It was just Errol being Errol. But one day, he walked out with a platinum tie pin and got caught. Warner Brothers paid quietly, but the damage lingered. Insurers hesitated, producers worried. Was it kleptomania masked by charm? Or was it an actor terrified of silence between the applause? In letters, Flynn admitted, stealing was a jolt, a rush of adrenaline between the boredom. But the rush never lasted. The roles slowed, the scandals piled up, and eventually, he left Hollywood altogether. A tavern brawl in Spain marked one of his final headlines. Not for a role, but for allegedly stealing candlesticks. Maybe he wasn't stealing objects. Maybe he was stealing back a sense of control. If this story touched your heart, please hit like and subscribe so you won't miss the next raw and heartfelt moments. Bette Davis, the woman who commanded Hollywood with her piercing eyes and uncompromising presence, was as known for her obsession with craft as her raw talent. On every set, Davis requested to keep props, not as trophies, but as extensions of her character. A brooch, a mother-of-pearl cigarette case, even a used wine glass. She took them home, convinced that touching them kept the role alive in her soul. But when the lights went out, she never returned them. Because for her, those items held pieces of herself. In the early years, studios turned a blind eye. Each borrowed object seemed to lead to another Oscar nomination. But as her untouchable status faded, they began to push back. Neiman Marcus once caught her walking out with unpaid evening gloves, and the scandal exploded. Davis responded by quietly mailing cash to prop departments in nameless envelopes, silent acts of penance. She once said, "I don't keep objects, I keep feelings." And perhaps she was right. Mickey Rooney, MGM's golden boy, was adored by millions as a child. But that spotlight came with a stolen childhood. Born into vaudeville, pushed from stage to screen, Rooney never truly knew what it meant to own anything. On set, he began pocketing small items, a pocket watch, a toy sword, a film prop phone, as if each one proved he had once been seen, had once mattered. Crew members joked, "If it weighs under 5 kilograms, Mickey will pocket it." One day, he was caught tucking a red prop phone into his jacket, but the studio laughed it off. As he grew up, the habit stayed. On USO tours, he would trade his old Zippo for soldiers' engraved lighters, holding on to their memories as if they were his own. But those memories, like his fame, faded. Directors grew wary of casting him in films with expensive props. In a later interview, Mickey whispered, "Stealing made me laugh, but it took far more from me than I expected." Joan Crawford, the woman with dagger-sharp eyes and proudly lifted shoulders, was the embodiment of rising from the bottom. But the higher she climbed, the more terrified she became of falling back. That fear drove her to take luxury items, not out of need, but because they represented worthiness. Store clerks recalled her gliding past the silk lingerie section, picking up satin gloves, and walking away as if the world owed her. One manager even sent the bill directly to MGM instead of calling the police, and the studio handled it as internal business. Friends described Joan's home as a museum of souvenirs, hotel silverware, embroidered theater towels, even baccarat ashtrays. Each item was a silent declaration that she had entered the elite world that once rejected her. When she was accused of stealing a $2,000 music box during the filming of Humoresque, Warner Brothers cut her pay and blamed an anonymous crew member. Joan retaliated by remodeling the studio's ladies' lounge with marble and installing a locked prop cabinet. But in the end, she couldn't escape the label of a classy thief. Because to her, stealing wasn't a crime. It was proof that she was no longer poor. Gloria Grahame, the queen of film noir, was known for her sultry lips and mysterious gaze. But her true secret was this: she stole scripts, not to sabotage, but to possess the lines she was never given. On the set of The Bad and the Beautiful, she was rumored to have swiped pages from Lana Turner's script, along with a fountain pen and compact mirror. A stationery clerk later reported she walked off with embossed notepads without paying. For Gloria, the rustling of paper brought peace, like a lullaby to an abandoned child. She once said, "If the lines aren't mine, I'll keep them as if they once were." But when annotated shooting schedules went missing, RKO had to halt production for 2 days, costing $50,000. After that, they began printing scripts with water-soluble ink to prevent leaks. She was gradually relegated to smaller roles, and co-stars clutched their purses tighter around her. Later, plagued by illness and debt, Gloria auctioned off 12 crates of memorabilia, mostly items she had once kept just for herself, not for wealth, but to remind herself that she once had a part to play, even if only in a dream. Lana Turner, the siren of lavish Hollywood melodramas, mesmerized audiences with her beauty and poise. But behind those captivating eyes and picture-perfect smile was a woman torn between a chaotic past and scandals that never faded. In 1961, Lana was caught in a Beverly Hills boutique slipping a $35 silk scarf into her handbag. The studio rushed to cover it up, claiming she was distracted by an urgent phone call. But staff admitted this wasn't the first time. Lana had quietly taken perfumes, gloves, and hairpins, price tags still attached. Psychologists believed stealing gave her a sense of control, while her real life spiraled under toxic romances, abuse, and the trauma of her daughter killing Lana's former lover. Petty theft became her way of shouting, "I still have power!" But that cry was met with silence from producers. Leading roles were delayed, then disappeared entirely. Lana was remembered not just for glamorous gowns, but for a scarf that was never paid for. Hedy Lamarr, dubbed the most beautiful woman in the world, was not only a mesmerizing screen goddess, but also a brilliant scientific mind. Yet in her later years, her name no longer appeared in lab reports or red carpet galas, but on the front pages of tabloids. In 1966, Hedy was arrested for shoplifting an eye cream and a few pieces of costume jewelry from a Los Angeles store. The public was stunned. How could a Hollywood icon and inventor be reduced to a thief? But for Hedy, it wasn't about material value. It was a mental game, another way to prove she could still outsmart the system. After 6 failed marriages, depleted finances, and a career rejected by Hollywood, she lived in small hotels, quietly tinkering with electronic theories. She once said, "Stealing doesn't shame me. What hurts is that they stopped seeing my worth." The case led investors to back away, delaying patents for inventions that would later form the foundation of Wi-Fi. She died alone, yet millions of devices still connect through her ideas. Hedy's story isn't just about theft. It's a desperate cry from a forgotten genius. Peter Lorre, with bulging eyes, a whispery voice, and a haunting stare, was irreplaceable in horror roles. But behind the scenes, he was a man who clutched his coat tightly, hiding items that didn't belong to him. On the sets of Casablanca and The Maltese Falcon, crew whispered that if a domino or matchbox went missing, check Peter's pockets. Born during chaos, a refugee from Nazi Germany, and never fully accepted by Hollywood, Lorre always felt like an outsider. Tiny objects, vintage lighters, mini chess pieces, hotel teaspoons, became his way of saying, "I was here." At first, producers laughed it off, until a rare ivory domino set vanished. It was found in his private room. After warnings, he lost roles, eventually fading into minor parts. Even friends began counting their belongings after dinner. Peter was never treated for his compulsive hoarding, and never quite found himself again. He lived between two worlds. On-screen a villain, off-screen a lonely soul trying to collect pieces of his existence. Tallulah Bankhead, the gravel-voiced star of stage and screen, famed for wild parties and unapologetic flair. But behind the booming laughter and ever-full glass was a woman fending off emptiness by lifting items not hers. Friends found their silver cases on her mantle, letter openers in her robe pockets. She'd quip, "I didn't steal, I liberated them from boredom." But her habits escalated. When a shop filed a police report, the studio intervened to have it erased. Soon, producers began bolting down props, insurers flagged her name, and contracts were quietly declined. Still, Tallulah pressed on. She raffled stolen items at charity galas, claiming to revive joy through rebellion. But joy faded. As the spotlight dimmed, she toured small theaters with trunks of memorabilia she barely remembered acquiring. "No one ever told me no, and I wish someone had," she once said. A haunting confession from a beloved spirit never truly reined in. Clara Bow, the original It Girl of silent film, exuded confidence and freedom on screen. But off-screen, she often carried invisible weight from a chaotic childhood and the relentless press. Crew members whispered that she would occasionally pocket hairbrushes, compact mirrors, or studio-supplied perfume bottles, not for luxury, but as if trying to bottle moments of safety in a world that never felt stable. Raised in poverty, with a mentally ill mother and an absent father, Clara's rise to stardom was meteoric and traumatic. In interviews, she confessed that fame made her feel even more alone. Those small items she slipped into her purse weren't trophies. They were her way of saying, "This moment is mine." As the studio system tightened control, Clara's behavior became more erratic. Gossip columns turned cruel. Eventually, she stepped away from the spotlight, retreating into isolation. But even in seclusion, she kept boxes of props, handwritten scripts, and lipsticks she never wore again. It was not about theft. It was about keeping the only pieces of a life that was never truly hers. Mae West, the boldest icon of the 1930s silver screen, shocked audiences with suggestive lines, but also with a curious habit: collecting props from every set she graced. Silk fans, lipstick tubes, lace handkerchiefs, even delicate crystal glasses, were quietly stashed away in her dressing room as if they were extensions of the characters she embodied. On television, she once joked, "I don't steal. I just see no reason to give things back." To some, it was just eccentricity. But to May, it was her way of maintaining control in a world determined to shrink her into a mold. Producers occasionally complained about missing props, but no one dared confront her while she was still filling theaters. Years later, when the spotlight faded, May kept every piece, boxed, labeled, and sorted by role. It wasn't theft. It was memory preservation in tangible form. And if Hollywood couldn't hold on to a woman like Mae West with fame alone, then she'd hold on to herself in all the ways no one else thought to. Dorothy Dandridge, the first black woman ever nominated for a Best Actress Oscar, was a vision of grace wrapped in layers of pain. Beneath the shimmering gowns and dazzling performances, she carried the loneliness of someone always standing just outside Hollywood's golden circle. Rumors swirled that she often brought home little things from backstage: a silk handkerchief, a perfume bottle, a tiny brush, not for their value, but because they were safe. In a world that constantly judged her, those objects became quiet anchors. A prized prop once vanished from a musical production, only to reappear weeks later near her dressing mirror. No one confronted her, but everyone understood. Dorothy existed in conflict, a desire to belong, and the sting of being seen as other. The items she held onto weren't stolen in greed, but in defiance, a way to assert her place in spaces that tried to erase her. In her final years, long after the spotlight faded and the offers stopped coming, Dorothy still kept those small tokens in an old suitcase, fragile proof that she had once stood in the light, even when the world refused to see her. Paulette Goddard, the radiant 1940s starlet and former wife of Charlie Chaplin, was the epitome of elegance and charm. But behind her composed poise was a woman constantly striving to feel worthy, not just on screen, but in the society that scrutinized her every move. Stagehands and insiders whispered about her habit of quietly pocketing delicate etched glasses, costume earrings, or silk napkins from lavish parties, as if they were medals for moments of inclusion. She was never caught, never called out in the press, her actions too discreet, too ladylike. Yet colleagues recall that missing items would often reappear by mail, weeks later accompanied by a handwritten letter full of apologies and reflection. For Paulette, it wasn't theft. It was an attempt to hold on to fleeting moments of belonging in a world that moved too fast. In her later years, tucked away in her Swiss estate, a cabinet was found filled with those tiny treasures, each one wrapped in tissue, labeled by year and film. As if memories for her only truly existed when she could hold them in her hands. Jean Harlow, Hollywood's original platinum blonde, radiated glamour in the 1930s. But behind the dazzling lights was a sensitive soul who often felt trapped by the studio system. Those who worked with her noticed she would quietly keep small items from the set: a hairpin, a powder compact, a pair of costume gloves, as if trying to reclaim slivers of identity in a life run by contracts, gossip, and fan expectations. When caught keeping a beaded clutch used in a scene, she simply smiled and said, "It fit me so well, I forgot it wasn't mine." No charges were ever pressed, but the studio took notice. As her fame skyrocketed, Jean grew more withdrawn. The little items she tucked away became her armor, a way to create a private space in a very public life. After her sudden death at 26, a cedar box was found in her bedroom, filled with carefully wrapped keepsakes. unnamed, unlabeled, but preserved in satin and scented paper. For Jean, the spotlight was never enough to illuminate the emptiness inside. And what she held on to, perhaps, was simply proof that she had once been here. Vera Ellen, the ethereal dancer of 1950s Hollywood, was known for footwork as light as air and a beauty that felt almost untouchable. But behind every perfect waltz was a woman trying to reclaim control in a ruthless industry. Co-stars recalled that Vera often kept dance shoes, hair ribbons, or rehearsal gloves, as if these were the only evidence of her devotion. One day, a silver pair of shoes vanished from a scene, only to be returned weeks later wrapped in silk with a note. I needed it to remember who I was. Vera struggled with eating disorders and the overwhelming pressure to remain flawless. The items she held onto weren't just keepsakes, they were refuge, a way to survive a world constantly demanding more. When she quietly withdrew from Hollywood, the world nearly forgot her. But in her tiny Beverly Hills apartment, a wooden trunk remained, filled with shoes, scarves, and fabric, each one a soft whisper that she had once danced in that dream. They were icons of a golden age. But behind every applause, every dazzling poster, was a silent sigh no one ever heard. 19 lives, 19 fractures. None the same, yet each burdened by a hollowness, a void they tried to fill with nameless, priceless things that held proof of their fading selves. They didn't steal to possess. They stole to preserve a piece of who they were, a piece slipping away beneath the weight of fame, expectation, and erasure. Kleptomania wasn't their crime. It was the desperate whisper that even the spotlight couldn't drown out. And if you've stayed until this final moment, perhaps you too understand what they never had the words to say.